The average life expectancy of an American infantry rifleman in the winter of 1944 was 10 days. That was the number waiting for every replacement soldier who stepped off a truck near the front lines of the Ardennes. 10 days. Not 10 months. 10 days. On December 21, 1944, one of those replacements was a 19-year-old private first class from a small town in upstate New York. His name was Francis Curry. Nobody in his unit had bothered to learn his name yet. Replacements rarely lasted long enough to be worth remembering. In the next 14 minutes, this anonymous boy would cross a street under German machine gun fire 3 separate times. He would pick up a bazooka that had no ammunition in it, run through open ground to find some, and put a single round into the one place on a German tank that could actually stop it. He would force 4 more armored vehicles to abandon the fight entirely. He would save 5 American lives. He would go on to receive the Medal of Honor. And almost nobody today knows his name. To understand what happened on that street, you have to start 7 years earlier, in a doorway, in Sullivan County, New York. 10 days. That was the statistic every replacement carried into the Ardennes that winter, whether anyone said it aloud or not. Most never made it home to hear the number quoted back to them by a Medal of Honor citation. Francis Curry had already beaten a different kind of arithmetic long before he ever saw a battlefield. He lost his father at 5. He lost his mother at 12, standing in the doorway of her bedroom in Sullivan County, watching her breathe her last after years of working herself thin to keep him fed. A foster family in Hurleyville took him in, kind people, strangers. He learned early what the county expected of a boy in his position: gratitude, quiet, and not asking for much. He carried firewood. He walked 2 miles to school in weather that kept grown men indoors. He was the kind of boy other children didn't bother giving a nickname to, because he never drew enough attention to earn one. By the time he turned 18, the gold stars were appearing in windows all along Main Street in Monticello, one for every boy who wasn't coming home. He read their names in the casualty lists, boys he'd played baseball with. In the summer of 1943, without telling anyone, he walked into the recruiting office and signed his name. He wasn't chasing glory. He was looking for the first family he'd ever had. The recruiting office in Monticello signed him in the summer of 1943, 3 months past his 18th birthday. Basic training took him to South Carolina, where heat pressed against a Catskills boy's uniform like a second skin, and drill sergeants ran recruits along roads that turned to red mud by afternoon. Francis approached the training differently than most. He learned the M1 Garand, 8 rounds, semi-automatic, lethal to 400 yards. He learned the Browning automatic rifle, nearly 20 pounds loaded, heavier than any weapon a boy his size should have carried, and it became the one he trusted most. Then, in a classroom under a tin roof, an instructor wheeled in a length of steel tubing and called it a bazooka. Francis asked how close he'd need to be to a tank. 100 yards, the instructor said, maybe 150 on a good day. He asked when he could fire live rounds. By the time he shipped out, he'd qualified on every infantry weapon in the field manual: the Garand, the BAR, the bazooka, the .30 and .50 caliber machine guns, rifle grenades, hand grenades. Other recruits specialized. Francis didn't. He understood something they hadn't worked out yet. You never knew in advance which weapon your hand would close on in the dark, or which one would decide whether you lived. The weapon itself had a shorter, rougher history than the boy who would eventually carry it. In 1942, Colonel Leslie Skinner and Lieutenant Edward Uhl worked at Aberdeen Proving Ground on an impossible order: build American infantry a way to stop a tank. They had a warhead, the M10 shaped charge grenade, but no way to launch it. The breakthrough came when Uhl, standing in an equipment yard, picked up a discarded length of scrap tubing and realized the tube itself could be the launcher. No recoil, no breach, just a straight line from a soldier's shoulder to the target. Generals watching the first demonstration in May 1942 saw it destroy a moving tank on the first shot. A soldier in the crowd thought it resembled a comedian's homemade horn called a bazooka. The name stuck. The early version failed badly in North Africa. Cold weather killed the batteries. In one engagement in Tunisia, a crew emptied every rocket they carried into a German tank at 40 yards, and it kept driving. The pointed rocket nose was skipping off sloped armor instead of detonating. Engineers redesigned it. The M6A3 rocket, fielded by late 1943, carried a rounded nose that would not glance off angled steel. Under the right conditions, it could punch through nearly 4 inches of armor. Under the wrong conditions, cold batteries, a twig in the flight path, it still killed the man holding it instead armor. On the morning of December 16, 1944, the German artillery opened along an 80-mile front, 2,000 guns firing in sequence, tearing apart a line American commanders had believed was finished defending itself. Old Hickory, Francis Curry's division, was pulled off the line near Aachen and rushed south to plug the gap. They reached Malmedy on December 17th and began digging into ground frozen so hard entrenching tools bounced off it. That same afternoon, 12 miles away at a crossroads called Bulge, an American column of 139 men surrendered to an SS armored unit under Joachim Peiper. The Germans herded them into a snow-covered field. Then the machine guns opened fire. 84 American prisoners were shot dead, some finished off at close range. A handful of survivors played dead in the snow and crawled to American lines after dark. By the time the story reached Curry's foxhole that night, it had already changed every man who heard it. There would be no surrendering to that column. Behind Peiper came a stranger threat. Otto Skorzeny, the Austrian commando who had rescued Mussolini from a mountaintop prison the year before, had assembled a brigade of German soldiers in captured American uniforms, driving captured American vehicles, briefed to seize bridges, and sow confusion in the rear. One of the bridges on his list crossed the Warche River, in a town called Malmedy. Curry didn't know the name yet. He would in 4 days. 4 in the morning, December 21st. German artillery fell on the American line for nearly an hour before the tanks appeared. Several of them, rounding a bend in the road in single file, shaped in the half-light like American M10 tank destroyers. For half a heartbeat, Curry thought they were friendly. Then the lead vehicle fired into an American position across the road. He sprinted across open ground swept by German machine gun fire and reached a building where 5 men from his platoon were already sheltering. In the corner sat an abandoned bazooka, no ammunition. Across the street sat an abandoned American half-track, and inside it, rockets. Curry crossed again, under direct fire from the approaching tank, climbed in, and came back with an armful of M6A3 rounds. He didn't aim for the tank's front. He aimed for the base of the turret, where the ring meets the hull, the one point an instructor in South Carolina had told him a shaped charge could actually jam. He fired. The tank stopped. Its turret twitched, tried to traverse, and locked. 4 crewmen bailed out, burned and coughing, and ran. A second tank began reversing, trapped by the wreck ahead of it. Curry crossed a third time for anti-tank grenades and fired them at the remaining 3 vehicles until their crews abandoned them too. In minutes, a column built to seize the bridge had dissolved. The tanks weren't the last of it. German infantry moved into a house down the street, and Curry answered first with his BAR, then from the abandoned half-track's mounted machine gun, firing until the belt ran dry and the house fell silent. Under that cover, the 5 men trapped with him escaped across the bridge. The line held. On August 17, 1945, 3 days after Japan's surrender, General Order No. 69 recommended Sergeant Francis Curry for the Medal of Honor. He received it, went home to New York, and spent the next 40 years at the Veterans Administration in Albany, helping men from Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf sort out benefits and paperwork he never mentioned earning through combat himself. Most histories of the Bulge spend their pages on Bastogne and St. Vith, the sieges that became household names, the ones with generals and famous one-word replies. Malmedy's second fight, the one at the Warche Bridge, rarely gets more than a paragraph, if that. But Skorzeny's mission depended on speed and confusion, and a single bridge held by a handful of men broke both. Historians studying Operation Greif tend to treat it as one of several small, unglamorous actions that quietly unraveled a plan built for chaos. Proof that outsized consequences don't always come from the battles that make the history books.